Hi, everybody. I'm Gold Derby News and Features Editor Ray Richmond, and I'm here today with Tony Phelan and Joan Rater, the creators, showrunners, co-writers, and executive producers of the powerful eight-part Holocaust-themed limited series A Small Light, airing on Nat Geo, Disney Plus, and Hulu. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
As I've mentioned before, I feel like I've spoken to everyone involved in this series, some of them twice, except for the two of you. So glad to finally meet. Um,
Happy to be here. Thanks.
I know that the two of you went to great lengths to make this story relatable to modern audiences. What made you decide to take such an iconic period piece in that direction?
Well, I usually don't like historical pieces. It's not that I don't like them, but I often feel at a distance personally. Tony feels differently, but if we were going to make this, I needed it to feel modern and relatable. I needed it to feel like something I would get into. And so that was really important. I've seen some pieces, some historic, like Chernobyl, I've seen it done really well, and I wanted that kind of feeling.
I think
And,
the other thing.
Tony, did you fight about it?
No, I mean, I understand where Joan is coming from, and I think that the thing that really struck us as we started to dive into Miep's life and her personality was just how modern to us she felt. She was a real firecracker. She was a 4'11" powerhouse, and everybody who knew her, both in her later life and at that time, said as much. And so we had this desire to kind of clear the cobwebs off the story. The other thing you're dealing with is it's a story that most people think they know. And so how do you bring a freshness to it and show people this whole other side of the story that they don't know, as a way of illuminating those characters, that from Anne's diary.
And for those unfamiliar with the story told in A Small Light, it focuses on Anne Frank's story from the perspective of Miep Gies, the woman who helped hide the Franks from the Nazis in Amsterdam in the early 1940s. So I can totally understand your concern that everybody feels like, oh, I know the Anne Frank story, and maybe that they felt like they've heard it too many times to want to commit, to 8 hours worth of watching a show, uh, unless it's something that felt more relatable and, as you say, not dusty. Um,
But they don't, what we didn't know, and we know a lot when we started this, was that everything we know about Miep and the people who helped hide the Franks and the other people up in the annex, we know from Anne's diary, right? So what Tony and I didn't know, and when we started our research, was that Miep and her husband Jan, while they were hiding the Franks up in the annex, were hiding other people in and around Amsterdam. And they couldn't tell the Franks and the other people because it put them in danger. If Miep and Jan get caught, the jig is up. And so we were like, oh my God, they're leading this double life. And then we started researching, and they were, Jan was an active member of the resistance. They were this newly married couple. So they had secrets from the Franks. They had secrets from one another. So we have always thought, we learn in Anne's diary, we hear this incredible coming of age story. On the other side of the bookcase is another coming of age story. And that's the story we tell in A Small Light.
There's one thing that bothered me about the show, and I'll be completely honest, and I'm sure you'll have a good answer to this, was that maybe it should have been billed not just as Miep's story, but Jan Gies' story too. I mean, I know that he plays a prominent role uh, with actor Joe Cole. But is there any merit to the argument that maybe his character isn't given his full due, at least in the narrative itself?
Well, that's interesting. Sure. I mean, it's a love story between the two of them. Here's the thing. I'll tell you. So we go to the Anne Frank Museum, Tony, am I talking too much? Do you want to answer this?
Nope, go
We
ahead.
we go to the Anne Frank Museum and we're really interested in this story, and we hear from the people that, Jan, through his work as a social worker, was recruited in a cell in the resistance. Wow, that's so interesting. So we start to try to do research to find out more about what exactly he did. Now, he was a Dutchman who didn't like to talk about himself or bring any, he was not, after the war, he didn't like to talk about it. He was very self-effacing. So, in interviews, Miep, because there was so much interest in Anne, talked at length about her role in helping hide them. Jan didn't talk about what he did during the war, but it's known that he did a lot. So we searched through public records, through, we hired a researcher, and we couldn't find much. So we had to do some kind of imagining. We knew he was a social worker. We knew social workers were in the resistance, did this type of thing because of their access to other people's houses. That's not really why we didn't sort of say, this is the story of Miep and Jan, but when I think about how to answer this question, I know that that was definitely an obstacle we felt, because we wanted to get this right. We wanted to, we took some creative license, but we didn't want to take creative or crazy amounts of creative license.
Yeah, because our goal is really, especially if there are young people encountering this story for the first time. I think the way young people consume media now, they're watching, they're Googling at the same time, they're trying to determine what's real and what's not, and you want to kind of encourage that. And for every time they say, did that really happen? Oh my God, that really happened. So yeah, Jan was a famously more reserved person, especially as he got older. But our director, Susanna Fogel, likes to tell the story that her grandmother, who is still alive, is a real piece of work and very funny. And Susanna always says, I can't believe that my grandmother became funny at the age of 70. I have to believe that she was funny and a pistol when she was 20.
But also the Miep and Jan of it all, a lot of what people are saying, like, oh, I miss Miep and Jan, they finished the series and they're like, I'm sad that I'm done. I miss spending time with those people. Much of that is due, I'll give myself a pat on the back for the writing, but a lot of it is Belle and Joe's chemistry is so off the charts. They're delightful people to spend time with. You root for their relationship because they're good and they love each other. Even when they're lying to each other, you're not worried like, uh-oh, this is going to fall apart. They love each other. So a lot of that was due, I think, to Belle and Joe just being these really real, kind people in real life, and they brought that to their characters.
It does also, though, raise this question of point of view, and we were very clear as we started to break the stories that we always wanted to stay first just with Belle's point of view, and then Belle or Joe's point of view. And that led to some challenging creative decisions. Like, we never wanted to be up in the annex when Miep or Jan wasn't there. Which meant when the Nazis come in episode 7 and arrest everyone, we don't go upstairs because Miep is like glued to that chair in the office. So she can't go up and see. She doesn't get a chance to say goodbye. She doesn't get a last moment with everybody, because in reality, Miep didn't. And that loss is part of the tragedy of the situation.
No, thank you for that explanation. It makes total sense about why Jan isn't, kind of given equal billing here. And in fact, I suspected it was because he wanted to take a back seat. And it's almost like when the difference between what we know about Anne and what we know about Margot. Margot,
Yeah.
we didn't have the diary.
Yeah.
But you brought up Belle and Joe's chemistry, which is phenomenal. And I just wanted to say, do you feel like you lucked out casting a lead as committed and dynamic as Belle Pally? Oh my God, the woman is just so impressive and such a force of nature.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we are so happy, grateful. Thank you, God and the stars. Yes, yes. We're so happy that we sort of had this brainstorm moment. Susanna Fogel texted us one night, what about Belle Powley? Yes, we said yes. She said yes, and it all happened very quickly. And she's the right person for the role.
And it's one of those it's one of those projects, having done this for a long time, where everyone said yes. All of our first choices said yes. And so we were blessed with just this amazing group of actors who were totally committed to the material and loved being together and loved spending time together on set. And so it was really, it was nice.
That helps for what was it, a 5 month shoot?
Yeah. 5 months
Yeah.
in Prague, and then we did 3 weeks in Amsterdam.
You want
Living
people to like
away
each
from
other.
home,
Yeah.
everybody's sort of together all the time. It could have gone any number of ways, some of them bad, and it was just a joy for everybody. I think I mean, I was like, I'm still every day, I can't believe I get to do this job. And there was a sense of that, like, how lucky are we get to tell stories like this.
And I was going to ask what made you decide to tackle Miep's story now in such a bold way. Why now? And I think you answered it that it came to you when you were visiting the Holocaust Museum, which makes a lot of sense because I'd often thought when I've seen Anne Frank projects, well, who are the people that stuck their neck out to,
Yeah.
to keep these people hidden, and that clearly had to be a risk to their lives as well. But what's your feeling about, not to put words in your mouth, but the scary parallels in the world today that call to mind the precursors to the Holocaust? A little bit, the rise of anti-Semitism, racism, and fascism here in America, and really around the world.
Uh, I mean, it's 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 truly shocking. It's devastating. It's like heartbreaking on all levels. I always say, that that the Franks and Miep and all of the people in that annex couldn't believe in their modern world. They had beautiful art, orchestras, you know, uh, modern appliances. I think they couldn't believe in their modern world that Hitler was allowed to flourish, that anti-Semitism was rampant, that such hatred was allowed to be normalized. And look at that sentence I just said. I mean, I think we all sort of go, somebody stop this. This is crazy. And there was a sense, Tony talks about feeling like when we were learning about the Holocaust as kids, that was the past, that it was over. And
the world had learned the lesson, and we just needed to keep reminding people about what had happened. But now I think what I've kind of come to about it is I have a tendency to be cynical about the world, about what's happening, about my ability to affect any kind of change. And coming out of this project, I think that, Miep's whole message was that anybody can make a difference, and that it can be in very small ways, that you don't have to carry a banner or a gun, or simple acts of kindness can do amazing things, and also can give you the hope to persevere through dark times. I mean, if you think about it, they kept those people safe for 2 years and then survived another year after they were gone. And that's a remarkable achievement in itself, putting aside then what Miep and Otto did to bring the diary to the world after the war.
I've heard you say something really interesting in other interviews, Tony, that we don't often think about. You were careful not to have your actors play the end of the story because they didn't know the end and
Exactly.
had
Yeah.
to live with hope. We forget that they don't know that everything's going to come crashing down in 44 or whatever, or 40,
Well, I
whatever.
think that the only way to survive there for 2 years was to believe every day that they were one step closer to getting out, which is why Miep had that tremendous weight on her, because she and Jan and the other helpers were their only touch with the outside world. So she describes kind of having to steel herself every day before she went up those steps, because she knew that when she opened that door, there were going to be 7 faces right there, just hungry for
Well,
some kind of good news.
imagine the sort of flip wherein, Miep is, working class. She was a working class girl, and the Franks were, upper class, very sophisticated people who moved from Germany. And she describes at one point leaving the annex one day, and Mrs. Frank followed her down and grabbed her arm and said, "Miep, I'm so depressed. I can't do this anymore. Help me." And she described, like, here's this woman, her boss's wife, who a few months earlier was hosting her at these beautiful, lovely dinner parties. And here now Miep is in this role of having to buoy her spirits. There's just so many beautiful human, moments that I think we can all relate to, especially having come out of pandemic, where there were days, as we're all living in, how long is this going to be? We don't know. Are we going to die? We don't know. So much uncertainty. And then you hear like a vaccine is coming out, and suddenly, there's a little bit of hope, or there's toilet paper at Target. There's a little bit of joy in the house, so in a very different, very small way, we could begin to see what this life might have been like.
You know, Tony and Joan, we all watch a show like this wondering if we'd have anywhere near the courage and fortitude of these people, that you're depicting in A Small Light. I mean, do you think people, I'm sure you've given a lot of thought to this, were people just built differently back then?
Um, I, I don't know. I think there was this, look, it was a simpler time. I think Miep, she talked about after the war. I always think about this because after the war, in her later years, every night there was like an elderly lady who lived above her. Every night after dinner, Miep would go sit with this elderly lady for a half hour and share a cup of coffee. We don't live in a world where we would go sit with our elderly neighbor for a half hour. We're too busy doing other stuff. So my answer is, yeah, I think people are built differently, but in some ways, we have this capacity now that they didn't have to affect change, to impact people, to get messages out. So that's a lame answer. I don't know the answer. I don't know.
I think that I think we have that capacity. I think that the capacity scares us because the capacity requires responsibility, and commitment. And that is, I think, where people who watch the show can say to themselves, what would I do? And in the world today, what more can I do? And I think that that's a message that as storytellers, we're always happy to grapple with and to have the audience grapple with, because I think
it's about sacrifice, right? I mean, Miep really just sacrificed as though like anybody would do that and anybody should. She had to, keep secrets from her family. It was about sacrifice. Sure, I'll do this. I will put my life in danger. I will do this. Of course, I will do this. Okay. So I think about that with my life. Like where do I come down on with sacrifice? Do I sacrifice? And the thing I can most relate to is many people, willingly, lovingly, easily sacrifice for their children. put their children's lives ahead of theirs. And so we're capable of it.
Right. But and as Miep would tell us, this wasn't a big deal. I just, yes, I put my life at risk, but any of us would do this if we're put in that position. It's hard to imagine being in that position and saying, "I won't help you."
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's the difference is, um, you know, to some degree, I think maybe Miep was right that it's impossible to imagine putting that commitment out there, but at the same time, it's also impossible to imagine
Right.
saying, "No, I won't help you."
Well, I mean, I think as important as Miep's immediate yes when Otto asks her to help him is what she says to Jan towards the end of the series, which is, if I don't do everything I can do, I don't think I can live with myself, and I don't think you would want to live with me.
But a real North Star for the series when we were creating it was we wanted to also show those moments of Miep says yes, right? But then she and Jan are alone in their house and they're like, holy moly, what did we just say yes to? And now these other people want help. Why should we have to do it? We don't barely know them. We wanted to show that those discussions, that these weren't people different than you or I, right? They had moments of like, I don't want to do this anymore. Meep talked about like, can I take a weekend off and go to a friend's wedding? And she got sick at one point and had to stay home, and everything fell apart and people were upset with her. So there were real feelings, I'm sure, of wait, what am I doing? Why am I doing this?
And that reality is what helps make this series so popular. We're going to have to wrap here.
Okay.
The 8-part A Small Light is available to view on Nat Geo and streaming on Disney Plus and Hulu. Tony Phelan and Joan Rater, you've created a powerful piece of television. Best of luck to you this Emmy season, and thanks for visiting with us today at Gold Derby.
Thank you, Ray.